Today, I want to tell you a story that rides the edge of danger and hope. It's about Marisol Vega, a singer with a voice that could melt stone, yet bound by debts her mother's gambling left behind. And Dakota Nez, an Apache warrior, scarred but unbroken, living far from Triste. When a wealthy man's trap forced their paths to cross, they fled into the wild with more than their lives at stake. What they found was a fight for freedom, and a love neither expected. If this story reaches your heart, leave me a comment. Now, let's begin. The air inside Delano Hart's grand house was thick with cigar smoke and the sweet burn of mezcal. Lantern light spilled over polished mesquite floors, glinting off brass spittoons, and the gold watch chain stretched across Hart's waistcoat. Outside, the desert wind was restless, rattling the shutters. Marisol Vega stood on the small stage set in the corner of the ballroom, her guitar resting against the curve of her hip. She wore the deep red dress Hart had insisted she choose from the rack at the seamstress's that morning, lace at the throat, skirt cut just short enough to show the shape of her calves. The dress clung to her when she swayed with the music, and she felt every set of eyes in the room follow the movement. It wasn't the first time she'd sung for men like these ranch owners, fattened on cattle profits. Prospectors with hands still black from the mines, drifters with too much liquor and not enough sense. But it was the first time she'd been in Hart's house. Her voice carried over the room, warm and clear, and the hum of conversation dulled. She sang in Spanish, the song her father used to play when the summer wind blew in from the Gila. Each verse felt like a thread she was holding on to, something steady in the haze of smoke and liquor. When the last note faded, Hart's slow clap broke the silence. "Beautiful," he said, rising from his chair near the head of the room. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come, Miss Vega, drink with us, a toast to beauty." "I still have 2 songs left," she said lightly, but the tightness in her throat was hard to hide. "They can wait." The glasses on the sideboard gleamed. He poured mezcal into one and handed it to her. She accepted. It would be worse to refuse in front of his guests. She lifted it to her lips, barely wetting them, but the burn still reached her throat. "That's not enough," Hart said, watching. "Drink." He was close now, close enough that she could smell the mix of tobacco and the sweet oil he used in his hair. She tipped the glass again, trying to make it look real. The room swam a little when she lowered it. "Let me show you something," he said, and his hand closed around her arm. She tried to pull back. "I should." The door shut behind them with a heavy click. The study was dim, the only light from a lamp on the desk. Papers lay scattered, maps rolled into tubes. His hand was on her waist now. "Don't," she said, her voice sharp. Hart's smile thinned. "You think you're too good? You've been singing for my coin, Marisol. Everything in that dress is paid for by me." She pushed him hard. Her hand found the bottle on the desk and she swung. It shattered against the edge, glass and liquor flying. He cursed, clutching his hand. She ran. The hallway was a blur. She could hear shouts behind her, men moving fast, boots on wood. Her pulse roared in her ears. She turned a corner and nearly tripped over a chain stretched across the floor. The other end was bolted to the wall, and in the shadows sat a man. He looked up slowly. His hair was long, black as raven wings, his skin burnished by sun and wind. Across his bare chest ran ochre stripes, the kind she'd seen painted on Apache warriors during certain ceremonies. His wrists were bound in iron cuffs, the chain short enough to keep him from standing fully. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, voice low, almost calm. "Neither are you," she shot back, scanning the lock. Heavy footsteps echoed closer. "Why are you here?" she asked quickly. "Ledger," he said. "Hart keeps one. I was going for it." "You want out?" she asked. "I'm not done yet." She stared at him. "Then you'll be dead." The footsteps were louder. She pulled a hairpin from her braid, jammed it into the lock. The metal clicked and the chain fell slack. He stood, taller than she'd expected. For a second, she thought he might push past her and leave her behind. Instead, he turned toward the hallway, scanning both directions. "Go," she urged. He shook his head. "The ledger. I'm leaving," she hissed. She ran, turning into a side passage. Behind her, the shouts grew. The back door was in sight when the wind hit hot and sharp, carrying grit that stung her cheeks. Out beyond the mesquite grove, the horizon was swallowed by a wall of red-brown dust. Baukat, a haboob, rolling fast. She stumbled toward the yard. Horses screamed in their pens, lantern light flickering in the storm's first breath. A hand caught her arm. She spun. Dakota was there, iron cuffs still hanging from one wrist. "You're going to get lost in that," he said over the rising wind. "You said you weren't done," she shouted. "I'm not. But neither are you." The dust hit them like a wave. Sand ground against her teeth, whipped her hair into her eyes. Dakota pulled her under the low rail of the corral, keeping low to the ground. Through the storm, shapes moved Hart's men, coughing, covering their faces. "This way," Dakota said, guiding her toward the darker line of the juniper grove. They crawled, the world shrinking to the space between their bodies, grit scraping every inch of skin. When they dropped behind the first trees, the roar softened. She lay on her back, lungs burning, the sky above a shifting red haze. Dakota crouched beside her, scanning the storm-blurred yard. "You have a name?" he asked. "Marisol," she said. "And you?" "Dakota." He watched her for a moment, then nodded toward the deepening dark. "Heart won't stop. You've bought a little time, but not much." She looked at him, at the marks on his chest, the iron cuffs, the eyes that held more than just the storm's reflection, and realized the wind wasn't the only dangerous thing she'd just stepped into. The storm had blown most of the night. By the time the sky began to pale in the east, the air was cool and washed clean. The red dust settled in shallow drifts along the road. Marisol walked in silence beside Dakota, her skirt heavy with grit, her throat raw from breathing sand. They'd left Hart's house hours ago, keeping to the low washes and the shadow of the juniper stands. The sound of the Gila reached her before she saw it, a steady rush, deeper than a creek, but softer than the roar of flood. When the trees opened, there it was, a broad sweep of green water, glinting under the dawn, its banks fringed with willow and mesquite. On a rise above the river stood a small cabin, its walls of hand-hewn logs darkened by weather, a thin ribbon of smoke curling from the chimney. Beside it, a low shed with a door half open revealed the scent of wood shavings and oil. Dakota paused at the edge of the clearing. "Stay close," he said. They crossed the yard. The door swung open before Dakota reached it, and a girl of 6 darted out, her black hair in 2 tight braids, her feet bare despite the morning chill. She stopped short when she saw Marisol, dark eyes narrowing. "This is Sophia," Dakota said. "She lives here." Sophia didn't speak, just looked Marisol up and down like she was weighing her worth. Marisol managed a smile. "Buenos dias." The girl's eyes flickered. "You talk funny," she said in English, then darted past them toward the river. "She's wary of strangers," Dakota said. "Come inside." The cabin was one room, with a sleeping loft above. A small table by the window held a clay jar of dried beans, a tin coffee pot, and a neat stack of folded cloth. Against the far wall stood a wood stove, its iron sides warm. Dakota poured water from a bucket into a basin and handed her a cloth. "Wash, I'll make coffee." The water was cold, but it felt good to scrub the grit from her face and arms. She watched him work, measured in his movements, no wasted motion. He ground coffee with a small hand mill. the smell filling the room. "What will you do now?" she asked. He glanced at her. "About Hart or about you?" "Either. I won't go back for the ledger, not yet. He'll be watching for me now. And you?" He studied her for a moment. "You can stay here until you decide." "I can't stay forever," she said. "I didn't say forever." Sophia reappeared at the door, cheeks flushed from running. "The river's high," she announced. "It's spring water from the rim," Dakota said. "It'll settle." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed one to Marisol. The heat of it spread through her fingers. She took a careful sip. "Thank you for last night." "You came back for me," he said. "That was your choice." She didn't answer. By mid-morning, she was helping Sophia string a line for laundry behind the cabin. The girl worked quickly, small hands deft with the clothespins. "He doesn't bring people here," Sophia said suddenly. "I guessed that," Marisol replied. The child looked at her with something like challenge. "Are you staying?" "For now." That afternoon, Dakota worked in the shed, shaping a length of juniper wood with a draw knife. The scent was sharp and clean, mingling with the smell of river water and sun-warmed earth. Marisol watched from the doorway. "What are you making?" she asked. "Something small," he said. "Juniper lasts a long time. It's good for things you want to keep." When he was done, he handed her a simple hairpin, smooth and pale, the grain of the wood running like water. "No debt," he said. "It's just a thing I made." She turned it in her fingers. "Thank you." The days settled into a rhythm. Marisol mended a tear in Dakota's spare shirt, helped Sophia with her letters using a stub of pencil and a scrap of paper. In the evenings, she sat by the river with her guitar, though the damp had warped one tuning peg. On the 4th day, Dakota asked, "You ever teach anyone before?" "Not really. I sang in the saloon to pay off my mother's debts." She played cards better than she could pay for them. Sophia piped up from the corner. "Can you teach me?" Marisol smiled. "We'll start with songs." By the end of the week, there were 3 neighborhood children coming to the cabin in the